I thought the Lunar Wolves were supposed to be the most aggressive of us all. That's how you would like the other legions to think of you, isn't it? The most feared of mankind's warrior classes.
Our reputation speaks for itself, sir. The Legiones Astartes would wage war across the galaxy to unite humanity into the compliance of the Imperium. The single greatest warriors to ever grace the stars, each legion would accrue glories for their deeds and become venerated for their service. Yet among all the Legiones Astartes, one would be favored as the first among equals, and legends of the Great Crusade until their downfall to the thrall of chaos. The deadly instruments of the betrayer of the Emperor, the Sons of Horus. Drawn initially from the populace of Terra, the Astartes of the 16th Legion would be raised to quell the dissident rebels of the techno-barbarian hordes. Volunteering to undergo the surgeries required of a space marine, the subjugated aspirants of the Emperor's conquered foes would be transformed into valiant enforcers of the Imperium's will. High proportions of the 16th would be recruited from the hunter clans of the Jutagran Bowl and Samsatian slums of Terra, and instill the hardships of toil of conflict within the attitude of the Legion. Intensely aggressive in nature, the 16th Legion would, with the implantation of their Primarch's gene seed, favor sudden, overwhelming methods of war, befitting their rugged and abrasive nature. Equally deployed as the first and last deadly blow to their opposition, the 16th would earn a reputation as warriors capable of inflicting utter devastation. Their glories, initially chronicled for their service in the first pacification of Luna, the 16th would regardless bear deep scars within their collective psyche with further campaigns such as the destruction of the Coriolis enclaves. Cementing legends which would persist to this day within Terran culture, the so-called Counting of the Wolf would instill superstitious fear into the hearts of men at the sight of the Legion's numerals. The opening salvo and crushing termination of 100 wars, the humorless and relentless Astartes of the 16th would, in the wake of the pacification of Terra's moon, embrace the title born of their reputation, the Lunar Wolves. Adorning their armor with a wolf's head emblazoned across the moon of Luna, the Astartes of the Lunar Wolves would also wear pelts across their ceramite to represent their predatory image. As the first legion to draw recruits from worlds outside of Terra, the Lunar Wolves would travel to the nearby mining colony of Cophonia during 800.M30. Within sublight velocity, the Lunar Wolves would reunite with the first Primarch of the Imperium to be discovered, their gene father. Though to call such an event fortuitous would be a grave error. Horus Lupercal would be found at a young age upon Cophonia, with much of his deeds redacted and obscured from Imperial scholars. What is known is that the son of the Emperor would thrive upon the derelict world and rise to become the leader of the colony's criminal gangs. Mentored by the Master of Mankind, the Lupercal would be the first of his sons to be molded into a leader of the Imperium. A protege of many talents, Horus would be swift in his assimilation of teachings of state, politics, empire building, and military doctrine. Given command of the 16th Legion, Horus would lead his army of 10,000 Astartes for 3 Terran decades as the singular Primarch of the Great Crusade. The Cophonian warriors inducted into the Lunar Wolves would be fitting killers to unleash the fury of the Imperium across the galaxy. Traversing beyond the Sol system, the first expeditionary fleets comprised of the 16th Legion, now abounding with tens of thousands of Cophonian Astartes, the tenacious space marines would hunger for battle. Instilling Cophonian traditions and customs into the Legion, the demeanor of the 16th would slowly supplant its Terran culture. Topknots and mohawks, common among the headhunter gangs of their homeworld, would mark the Astartes of the burgeoning Legion, as the killing blows of campaigns would be referred to as a Bathan, or the throat cutting of their enemies. Intensely loyal to their Primarch, The Lunar Wolves would follow in his footsteps as the charismatic and indomitable champions of the Imperium. For soon, their legacy would be cemented in legend with the dawn of the Crusade, which would mark their Genefather as the most cherished son of the Emperor. The Orc Xenos had spread across the stars alike to a virulent plague. The Primarchs of the Emperor had been restored unto the Imperium, and every legion had taken arms to bring compliance to the Void. The Orc warlord, Erlak Erg, would amass a tide of orcs so vast that the entire assembled Imperial military would be the only sufficient response to its might. Assembling every one of the Legiones Astartes, countless Imperial army regiments, and the might of the Omnissiah's Titan Legios, the Master of Mankind would enact the Ulanor Crusade. The Lunar Wolves had been lauded above all for their glory, and with their Primarch at the head of their campaigns, annihilated every foe in their path with inelegant yet effective force for over 2 centuries. The Imperium had grown to become the single largest star-spanning empire ever seen, yet it would take every able-bodied warrior of humanity to defeat the Greenskins. Surrounding the perimeter of the Orc expanse, the Imperium's vast armies would drive back the tide. Cornering the Stellar Empire upon the world of Ulanor Prime, the Emperor would deploy 100,000 Astartes, 8 million Imperial Army soldiers, and the might of thousands of Voidcrafts in order to invade the Orc homeworld. Alongside Horus Lupercal and his Lunar Wolves, the Emperor would lead the charge in slaying Erlak Erg and ending the blight of the Greenskins. Horus Lupercal would slay the Orc warlord and cast its corpse from the tower of the Orcs' abominable citadel. The Orcs would be routed, with the Lunar Wolves proving crucial to dealing the death blow to the upstart Greenskin Empire. And the Master of Mankind would recognize his most cherished son and his legion for their unimpeachable service to humanity. Bestowing Horus with the title of War Master, the Lupercal would be tasked with leading the remainder of the Great Crusade as the Emperor returned to Holy Terror to conduct his secretive Webway project. The Lunar Wolves would be honored alike to their Genefather and be renamed the Sons of Horus as a mark of respect for their venerated Primarch. Now endorsed as the preeminent Astartes Legion, the Sons of Horus would continue to bring worlds into compliance for the remainder of the Great Crusade. Respected by their peers above all, doubt would nonetheless take hold within the Legion's Genefather. Initially resistant to change the moniker of his legion, Horus would relent to his father's gesture, much to the chagrin of his brothers. Resentment would grow among the most ambitious Primarchs, and divisions would begin to divide the familial bonds of the Emperor's sons. The War Master would be burdened with the single greatest duty in humanity's history, to complete the Emperor's campaign to rule the galaxy. Fearful of falling short of his father's deeds, Horus would become susceptible to the guile and manipulations of the servants of the ruinous powers. Lorgar Aurelian, Primarch of the 17th Legion, the Word-Bearers, had already been ensnared by chaos and would dispatch his first chaplain, Erebus, to whisper falsities into the War Master's thoughts. Denied clarity by the Emperor in his dealings of the Webway project upon Terra, and anxious of failing the burgeoning Imperium as its newly appointed Commander-in-Chief, Horus's fall from grace would be swift. Bitterness, frustration, and paranoia would burrow deep within Horus's soul, and upon the moon of Darwin, the War Master would be fatally wounded. The once friend of Horus, planetary governor Eugen Temba, had been corrupted by the fell plague god, Nurgle. Commanding hordes of undead soldiers, Temba would wield the malevolent Kinebrak Anaphame, stolen by Erebus, and with its edge, pierce the War Master's armor. Digging into the flesh of the Lupercal, its corrupting influence would corrode Horus's body. Festering wounds upon his very soul, the most trusted Astartes of the 16th, the Mournival, would bring the comatose body of the War Master to the Legion's apothecaries. unable to rouse their Genefather from slumber as his condition ever worsened. In an act of desperation, the Sons of Horus would endorse the Council of Erebus. Taking Horus's body to the Temple of the Serpent Lodge upon Davin's moon, the Davinite shamans of the lodge would begin their ritual to revive the Lupercal. Their dark arts would transfer Horus's spirit to the Immaterium, wherein the War Master would observe a vision of the Imperium of Man's dystopian future. Humanity worshipped the Emperor and his Primarchs as gods, whilst toiling within a regime so terrible that it stood in opposition of every teaching of the Imperial truth. The gods of chaos would reveal the Emperor's theft of knowledge from the Immaterium to create the Primarchs and grant him power beyond any mortal being. Accepting a pact with the ruinous powers, Horus would be promised the galaxy should he slay the Emperor and sunder the Imperium. Awakening from his nightmare, Horus would be reborn as the fell champion of chaos. Ignorant of his own intervention in the portrayal of the grim future he would create, the War Master would rally every Primarch embittered to their treatment by the Emperor and begin his damned civil war against the Imperium. Purging the loyalist elements within the 16th Legion, Horus's most trusted officers would enact fratricide against their once battle brothers upon the world of Istvan III. The Horus heresy had begun, and the fate of humanity now hung in the balance. The Emperor would soon learn of Horus's betrayal and dispatch his vast armies to combat the traitors to the throne. The Legiones Astartes would wage war among one another in countless bloody wars and battles as the galaxy burned. For years, the War Master would lead his army of psychopaths, despots and heretics towards Holy Terror. The loyal heroes of the Imperium would stall the War Master's advance as countless souls of every creed of the Imperial war machine blunted their blades and fired every last bolter, lasgun and void cannon in their desperate defiance of the traitor assault for 7 Terran Standard years. The champion of the ruinous powers would not be slain by any mere mortal, for the fate of humanity would be decided by the final battle against the Emperor. The Sons of Horus would lead the charge into the heat of the Imperium's might, as the Siege of Terra wrought untold casualties between the Legiones Astartes. Standing at the side of their Genefather during the culmination of the heresy, the final battle to claim the soul of humanity would begin. Bloated with power, Horus would in his duel with the Emperor wound the master of mankind and be poised to rule the galaxy as its Dark King. Yet with a final blast of psychic energy, the Emperor would purge the War Master from existence. Reeling in horror at the demise of their champion, the remnants of the broken Sons of Horus would flee into the Eye of Terror. Pursued by the vengeful loyalist legions, the 16th, once within the embrace of the Ocularis Terribus, would find safe harbor upon the demon world of Malium. Offering their souls to the Chaos Gods for scraps of their power, the surviving members of the Sons of Horus would be vulnerable to infighting among the remnant traitor legions. Enduring the Legion War, the Sons of Horus would once more be shamed with the Emperor's children's theft of their Primarch's corpse. Fabius Bile, Chief Apothecary of the 3rd Legion, would attempt to clone the War Master in order to once again lead the traitor legions to destroy the Imperium. Succeeding in his experiments, Bile would create the Lupercal anew, if only for a moment. Ezekiel Abaddon, first captain of the 16th, would confront the clone of his Genefather and slay the avatar of his legion's failure. The Sons of Horus were extinct, a dead legion befitting a failed patron. Yet from the corpse of the Sons of Horus, a new legion would be cannibalized. Abaddon the Despoiler's heralds of his accursed crusades to destroy the Imperium, the Black Legion. The organization of the 16th would first be molded during the days of the Unification Wars of Terra. Adhering closely to the outlines first devised by the Officio Militaris prior to the introduction of the Primox to the Imperium, the then Lunar Wolves would be divided into squads between 10 and 20 Astartes. Led by sergeants, groupings of squads would be led by veterans whom would be referred to as chieftains, with the reunion of their Primarch and the customs of Chthonia's gang culture. Maintaining great armories and weapon stores, the 16th Legion would be outfitted with ample armaments, befitting specialized squads containing destroyer and seeker units. Tithed great numbers of armored vehicles from worlds brought into their compliance, Horus would observe the legions of his brother Primarchs and incorporate effective compositions of units into squads such as breacher squads of the 7th Legion, forming despoiler squads trained to overwhelm weakened enemy emplacements with close combat weaponry and concentrated suppressing fire. These squads would be adopted by the White Scars and Iron Warriors legions in their attempt to mimic their effectiveness. Companies would be led by the legion's captains and incorporate several squads into the fold of sizes befitting each individual engagement. Some companies would comprise as few as 36 Astartes, whilst others would eclipse 900, each led by commanders specializing in their own doctrines of war. Companies would also include specialists within their ranks to add versatility in their methods of waging war, with the standard averaging 2 veterans, 3 reconnaissance, 1 heavy support, and several support weapon squads. Forming battalions, chapters, cohorts and regiments from groupings of companies, the Sons of Horus would adhere to strict hierarchical command, if not stringent organization. Crafted for individual campaigns by the War Master himself, the 16th Legion would rely heavily on the leadership of their captains for each rapid assault formation, referred to as spear tips. Such pragmatism would not, however, be evidence of carelessness, as Horus would allow for his legion to strike with precision and self-reliance in every theatre of war. Though among certain squads, brotherhoods of close-knit warriors would form, with some squads adopting honorific titles such as the First Sons and Deathmakers, with some even bearing their squad's chieftain's name as a moniker. Customs of Chthonia's gang culture would see the widespread adoption of sigils and kill markings across veteran Astartes' armor plate, to which junior members of the Legion would imitate. The transition of their armor's white paint to sea green would further distance their customs from their origins of terror. Embracing the dark traditions of blood pride and fiefdoms of Chthonia's past, the Sons of Horus would ever slowly turn from the Emperor's example. Amassing between 130,000 to 170,000 Astartes prior to the events of the Horus Heresy, the Sons of Horus would be among the numerically largest legions of the Imperium. Given command of a vast fleet in excess to any of their peers, save for the Imperial Fifth Legion, the 16th would command over 100 capital ships and 300 smaller support vessels. The Crusades of the War Master would be led by their imposing flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, and deploy its most deadly warriors to the vanguard of battle. Horus Lupercal would be the utmost authority in commanding his legion, yet facilitate his orders to be carried out by his closest advisors. Among his most trusted advisors, the Mournival would give counsel to the War Master in his deliberations and strategies to bring compliance to the galaxy. Consisting of 4 chosen captains, membership within the Warrior Lodge would be enshrined in tradition and steer the destiny of the Legion through their influence. Embodying the virtues and glories of the Lunar Wolves and subsequently Sons of Horus, the Mournival would adorn their pauldrons with the cycling phases of moonlight to signify the changing nature of their legion. Prior to the fall of the Legion, Ezekiel Abaddon would bear the full moon, Horus Aximand would bear the half moon, Garviel Loken would bear the new moon, and Tarik Torgadon would bear the gibbous moon. The Elite First Company would contain 2 elite squads of the chapter's finest warriors. The Gestarin would be commanded by First Captain Ezekiel Abaddon, whilst the Cachelan Reaver Assault Squad would be led by Callus Ekadon. Clad in black armor, in stark contrast to their Lunar Wolves' original pearl white sheen, the First Company would lead the most deadly of charges into the heart of their enemies. Favoring tactical dreadnought armor, the Justeran and Catalan Reavers would prove to be an overwhelming force capable of sundering any defensive positions with overwhelming firepower. Yet not all members of the 16th would be honored for their deeds in battle, for those whom brought dishonor to the Sons of Horus would be relegated to the Destroyer Squads. Armed with weapons of devastating power, such as rad weapons and phosphex bombs, the Destroyer Squads would march into battle in chem-scalded armor plate. Considered a necessary evil by their legion, the Astartes of the Destroyers would carry out the dark deeds necessary to bring their enemies to heel. Prior to their descent into the clutches of the ruinous powers, the gene seed of the 16th would be among the purest of the Astartes legions. Derived from Horus's genome, the gene seed of the Lupercal would greatly empower any subject implanted with the organs to standards above the majority of Astartes aspirants of their peers. Yet despite the pedigree of such materials, the Legion's corruption by the forces of chaos would pervert its function and lead to rampant mutations within the ranks of the 16th. Cherishing their abominable changes with pride by the degenerates of the traitorous Space Marines, the Sons of Horus, while unable to reimplant the gene seed of their fallen brethren into new initiates, would kill many potential neophytes in the attempt. It is for this reason that the longevity of the Sons of Horus Legion would be irreparable in the wake of the death of their Primarch, and lead Abaddon the Despoiler to draft recruits into his Black Legion of varying, disparate warbands. The homeworld of the Sons of Horus, Cophonia, would fall to ruin in the years following the Horus Heresy and fragment into asteroid debris due to the planet's unstable geostructural integrity. Once rich in valuable ore traded across the stars, Cophonia's carcass serves as further reminder of the downfall of the 16th Legion, though conjecture among Imperial scholars point to Cophonia's destruction at the hands of Loyalist fleets during the Great Scouring of the Traitors. The gang world had already shown signs of degradation and degeneration during the time of the Great Crusade. Adaptable in their strategies and martial capabilities, the Sons of Horus would, when commanded by their Primarch, prove to be a reliable and exceptional fighting force. Yet with the fall of the War Master at the hands of the Emperor, the once proud warriors of the Imperium would fall into disorganized panic. Broken in discipline, morale, and numbers, the Sons of Horus would dissolve into small warbands ruled by despotic chaos champions. Their Gene-sire had been proven false, and in the power struggle left from his passing, a new legion would be born. First Captain Ezekiel Abaddon would abandon his legion to seek purpose and pursue answers from the Dark Gods. The 16th had shed many skins from the grey storm cloud sheen of unification, the pearlescent splendor of the Lunar Wolves, and pale green honoring the Legion's triumph of Ulanor as the venerated Sons of Horus. Their superiority had been bested, their pride torn asunder, and failure stained the very air where the Astartes of the 16th lurked. They were no longer the wolves of ancient terror, and the Eye of Horus, once emblazoned proudly on their armor, now served only as a reminder of their disgrace. Returning to the galaxy with the blood of his reborn Primarch drenching the lightning claw once used to wound the master of mankind, Abaddon the Despoiler would rally the fragments of his past legion into a new army. The Black Legion would be born from the ashes of the Sons of Horus, and under the leadership of the new War Master of Chaos, they would not rest until the Imperium's destruction had been achieved. Now the single largest warband of the ruinous powers, the Black Legion stalks the galaxy, hungry for the blood of the Emperor's loyal subjects. For the Sons of Horus may be extinct, but the bitter fury of its legacy shall live eternal. Tell us how the Sons of Horus took their new title. Tell us how they became the Black Legion. At first, I had no answer. I wasn't expecting the question was genuine. I said I would tell you how the Sons of Horus died, and how the Black Legion was born. I never said one became the other. But he wasn't finished. He had scripture of his own to quote. It is written by Skryre Dianthon, and thus driven from holy terror, and reigning forevermore in the underworld, the Sons of Horus, the treacherous 16th, became the Black Legion. Ah, suddenly it all made sense. From shame and shadows recast, I said softly, the words for myself alone, in black and gold reborn. What? I told you, before the beginning, there was an end. The Sons of Horus never reigned in the Eye. Their ghosts commanded nothing but graveyards of their own warships. Their shades ruled over fallen fortresses. The Sons of Horus died 10,000 of your years ago. I know. I watched it happen. They were the 16th Legion, but the Black Legion was not founded by the Emperor and never fought in his name. It bears no number. Numbers were only bestowed upon the legions of the Great Crusade, and we, my Imperial friends, are the Legion of the Long War. This has been a tale of the Great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. The Sons of Horus would embody the fall from grace of the traitor legions and follow in their Genefather's footsteps to damnation and extinction. Yet in my next transmission of the Legiones Astartes, we shall elucidate another traitor legion brought low in their pursuits to embody their Genefather's might. The sorcerous children of the Crimson King, the Thousand Sons.